course, I think Morris did too. Don't forget they're twins, you know, so there was a specific, special way that they would play off each other that only twins would know.
Robin and I were not identical. We're fraternal twins, but we have the same sense of humor. We have the same love of the same kind of music.
Being a twin, I don't think it's so much having much to do with the Bee Gees. I think we would have been the Bee Gees if even if we hadn't been twins. I never thought of me and Morris as separate from Barry. I always saw the three of us as three equal brothers.
By 1955, Hugh's band had broken up, so in search of new opportunities, he moved the family back to Manchester. In the glory days of the Empire, Manchester was the world's cotton capital, one of the great industrial centers. Now it was a working-class city in decline. So too were the Gibb family fortunes. To support Barbara and the 4 kids, Hugh held down 2 jobs. The house was always filled with music. The brothers were influenced by the Mills Brothers and the Everly Brothers. By the time Barry was 9 and the twins were 6, they were already singing in 3-part harmony.
There was quite a number of times when my parents and my sister would come in the room and wonder if the radio was on when we were doing that early stuff.
Lollipop was one of the songs he used to sing, remember?
Lollipop, lollipop, lolly, 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 lollipop, lollipop, lolly, 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 lollipop, lollipop, lolly, 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 lollipop, my lollipop.
Robin and I seem to have evolved into 2 different leads, and Morris is an expert harmonist, is that the right word? But he would always know where to put that other melody, to make a 3-part harmony.
When Barry was 9 and the twins, Maurice and Robin, were 6, they formed a band called the Rattlesnakes.
The Bee Gees' musical career actually began at the movies. One day before the feature, a boy got up on stage and mimed to an Elvis Presley record. The brothers were inspired to try it themselves.
So we got the guitar and the records that we intended to mime to, and on the way to the Gaumont Theatre, we were running, and Morris dropped the records. In those days, they broke, folks.
We were very disappointed that we'd lost our chance, but we persuaded the manager to allow us to go on and sing anyway.
And we just did what we did at home. And the kids loved it, and I remember that feeling. It was great.
And we had our first real audience rush, you know, and wow, this is what we want to do.
Walking down the street in Manchester, I remember Barry saying that one day we're going to be really famous. And we said, oh yeah, whatever you say. He's the big brother, you know.
As pint-sized rock and rollers, Barry, Robin, and Morris performed frequently at local theaters. To adults in the 1950s, rock and roll was synonymous with trouble. And so were the brothers Gibb.
Barry and Robin were terrorists. I mean, nothing stopped in their way.
Now when I think back, I feel really bad for my parents. Because if I'd have been my parents, I would have been pulling my hair out, you know. And my father had little enough as it was.
Robin especially was very naughty. He used to light fires all over the place.
Oh, yeah. You mean the flame?
He used to set hedges on fire. He'd light fires under the bed.
Yeah, I was a bit of a firebug when I was young.
Barry and Robin were constantly getting into trouble. Local authorities confronted Hugh and Barbara, suggesting that if they didn't want to see their boys end up in reform school, they might want to consider emigrating. At the same time, there was a new arrival in the Gibb household, Andy, born in March of 1958. Shortly afterwards, the family decided to make a fresh start.
I'd never heard of Australia, just a strange word to me, Australia. I'm sort of Australia.
Oh, amazing adventure. Because that was what was in our spirit. That's why we were always getting into mischief. The idea of what's around the corner really was inside us. So the idea of going to Australia, we didn't even know what that was. But sounds good. Let's try it.
The Gibbs settled in Queensland, a state in northeast Australia known for its sunshine, beautiful beaches, and the Great Barrier Reef. Hugh took a job as a photographer. He bought an 8mm camera, and the brothers immediately began making home movies.
I was filming them. I was always the guy behind the camera, because I've always been the technical one. Barry and Robin, I wouldn't go as far as to say that their videotape, which players are still flashing 12, but We'd film home movies of fights and things, and people like hostage taking, or people blowing up the tower. We used to just come up with some daft stuff.
In Australia, the brothers continued their quest for fame. To achieve that goal, they would sing just about anywhere.
We always looked for the best toilets in town.
We'd go and sing in there because of the echo. And there's a great one I remember in Pitt Street, Sydney. It was in the park, and it was a great echo, really long, and it was. We sang these harmonies. They sounded like records.
The brothers took their act to a local speedway where they sang between races. The crowd showed their appreciation by throwing coins. Bill Gates, a local disc jockey, was impressed and persuaded Hugh and Barbara to let him promote the boys. As the initials BG were everywhere, Bill Gates, Barbara Gibb, Barry Gibb, Brothers Gibb, it was suggested the trio be called the Bee Gees. Soon the boys were heard regularly on Gates's radio show. In the summer of 1960, the Bee Gees got their next big break.
The Bee Gees, Barry A., the leader of the group, come here. Barry Gibb and your young brothers. Now, come on, who are you? Which is which? You're twins, eh?
I'm Robin.
Robin?
Morris.
And Morris. Now, you all sing together, eh?
That's right.
And your brother Barry plays. Now, come on up here.
This was the first of what would be many TV appearances over the next few years. The Bee Gees also played clubs and county fairs where they honed their craft as performers. With the act still in its formative stages, show business veteran Hugh became their manager.
My father, bless him, has been unbelievable in our lives. He has been the main instigator of everything that we learned about the stage.
Oh, my old man, the dustman, he wears the dustman's hat. He wears blimey trousers, and he lives in a council flat.
Even down to little things like when you go on, smile, because if you look like crap and you feel like crap, so will the audience. Smile, they'll smile with you. He taught us professionalism.
I said, now hang on, Dad, you're getting past your prime.
And I was doing the clothes. We used to make all the little waistcoats, and we cut an old pair of evening shoes up to make BG and gold leather on the little things,
In 1963, their dream of becoming stars took a giant leap forward. They signed a record contract. What made the Bee Gees unique at this young age was that they weren't just singers, they also wrote songs, and their very first release was a Barry Gibb original.
Kiss me once, oh yeah, baby. Kiss me twice, oh yeah, crazy. Kiss me 3 times, the 3 kisses of love, oh yeah.
We released quite a few of our own songs and couldn't get a hit. We tried singing a couple of other people's songs, and we still didn't get a hit. So we thought, well, we'll just go back to singing our own songs because, if we have flops, at least there are flops.
Tell me that you really care. Run your fingers through my hair. Kiss me once, kiss me twice, and I'm in paradise. Kiss me once.
At this point, the brothers were supporting the family as professional entertainers, singing adult songs to adults. But their music and their ambitions were instantly transformed in 1964, when Australia, like the rest of the world, was invaded by the British.
When the Beatles came to Sydney, the magic was unbelievable. I was mesmerized by them because they were doing something that we loved to do. And they were successful at it.
I loved it because it was so... this was a group, and they were singing 3-part harmony. And they were singing it like we did.
What shall I do? What shall I do? What shall I do?
No one seemed very interested in us. The record company, nobody. We were doing television shows, but we were just regular TV acts. We weren't people having hit records, And that was our dream. And at that point in time, our dream was being blocked.
I was totally convinced that the right thing for us to do was to leave Australia. We knew if we were going to make it big internationally, we had to leave Australia and go to London.
Righto, chaps, let's have a check. Black, check, check. Righto, right. RPM, Morris. Okay. Right.
Just before leaving the country, the Bee Gees recorded one last song, Spicks and Specks.
Where is the sun that shone on my head?
The Bee Gees made a lasting impression on their youngest brother, Andy. Andy would watch his brothers perform from backstage, marveling at what he saw. Andy dreamed of being a performer too. And it was his older brother, Barry, who encouraged Andy's love of music. Barry bought Andy his first guitar at age 9.
He used to stand in the middle of them when they were rehearsing. Make them really mad, you know. You move him, you know. But, yes, he always liked to be where they were, singing with them.
Andy was very much emulated Barry a lot, you know, and he thought a great deal of his older brother, you know, so he had a sort of a hero worship for him.
In January 1967, the entire Gibb family boarded a ship that would take them back home to England. While at sea, they received unexpected news. Spicks and Specks had gone to #1 in Australia. But there was no turning back. The Bee Gees were sailing into unknown and possibly treacherous waters. In February of 1967, when the Bee Gees arrived in England, the music scene was still dominated by the Beatles, in whose wake had come the Rolling Stones, The Who, and many other successful groups. The Bee Gees were determined to be the next big thing, but their optimism was immediately challenged by a random encounter with another group.
When we got off the ship, there were these 4 guys standing on the dock. It was nighttime and it was thick fog. And these 4 guys were dressed exactly as the Beatles were dressed in Help.
They said they were a group, a failed group, and said, groups are out, it's over.
And they said, you know, go back. And we'd go back where? It took us 5 weeks to get here, you know. Once again, it's like the resilience thing. It didn't matter what came our way. It was just another obstacle. Get out of the way. We're going to make it. We're going to be famous.
The Bee Gees returned to England from Australia with the dream of becoming British pop stars.
Before leaving Australia, the Bee Gees had mailed demo tapes to prospective record companies, agents, and managers in London. Nobody was interested, except for Robert Stigwood, who at the time was partnered with the Beatles manager, Brian Epstein. Stigwood liked what he heard and summoned them to an audition.
Robert came in his coat, looking a bit like Oscar Wilde, you know.
I've always felt to this day he was a little the worse for wear when he came down. But I'm being kind, Robert.
They claim I fell asleep, which is rubbish.
And we did our club act. From even the Peter, Paul and Mary section we do.
We did about 4 or 5 songs, and he had 2 people next to him, and then he got up and he nodded to them, and they all walked out. And that was it.
And they came home and they were really heartbroken. They said it was just a waste of time.
The Bee Gees believed that Stigwood had not really heard them. They were wrong. That night, he called to offer the brothers a 5-year contract.
My gut instinct told me that they would be sensational because you can't deny talent. And the talent was so obvious.
The link between Bob Stigwood and the Bee Gees was very close. And the relationship was just like that of Brian Epstein and the Beatles. For Bob Stigwood, the Bee Gees were his boys. And it was like a family almost.
And the thing is, Robert loved them and he believed in them. Sometimes a bit of a complex relationship, but it certainly worked.
He opened up the world to the Bee Gees very, very quickly. And I don't think at that particular time anyone else could have done that job. And what's happening to us today is because of what he did then.
Within months, their new manager, Robert Stigwood, was making it happen.
It was all like a fantasy come true. The place that we'd left earlier was suddenly the place where we wanted to be, you know, professionally.
The first thing the Bee Gees needed to do was expand from a vocal trio to a proper rock band. They added 2 Australian musicians, Colin Peterson on drums and Vince Maloney on lead guitar.
Robert Stigwood sat there and said, "You're going to do it, and I'm going to make sure you do it." And he never, ever made a negative comment about